Hey, what's up guys and welcome back to askNK. Today we're looking at Substance 3D Modeler. This is the pre-release version of the 3D Modeler, and this beta version is basically giving 3D artists an idea of what the final 3D modeler tool would look like. And today we're going to explore the 3D Modeler, take a look at how you can get started, how you can work with most of the fundamental stuff that you can get with the desktop version, and finally how you can set this up to your final DCC app of choice and the kind of results that you can get. It is worth clearing that this tool is not a 3D modeling tool like it is with the name. It is more of a sculpting tool that has a couple of tricks up its sleeves. So with this said, let's get right into it. So with the Substance 3D Modeler simply open right here, you can see that the user interface looks pretty easy. How you can work with this is pretty simple, as if you hold down Alt on the keyboard, with your left mouse button you can upbeat, Alt on the keyboard with your right mouse button you can zoom in and zoom out, Alt on the keyboard, and with your middle mouse button you can pan. If you take a very close look within your viewport, you would notice that the primitive that you have does have a very tiny node. This node is more like the customization node, which you can use to scale the model up and down. So if we switch over to the torus, for example, we can also use this to scale the torus up and down. And we can also use this to play with the radius of the torus. And this applies to every single object that you have here. And it just makes customizing this within your viewports quite interesting. Now within the viewport, you would also notice that we have these gizmos, which you can use to rotate your object, scale, and also translate. Within the user interface, you would notice we have a couple of tools right here. You'd also notice that we have a couple of tools here, some here, and right over there. By default, these are like the very basic menus that you have. And these menus are pretty interesting the way they work. And if you'd like to see more menus, if you right click, you would notice that we have an action menu that deals with layer, the duplicating of layers, grouping, the resolution, in case you like to increase the resolution of the model that you want to sculpt on. And you see that we have some repetition, the symmetry, and also locking. Now we're going to explore some of these and see how they perform. So to start making stuff, you need to select the geometry that you would like to start off with. And the geometry placement that you have are of two forms. We have the Gizmo one, and then we have the surface placement. Now the surface placement is what I would consider as the sculpting. So if you switch over to the surface, this is where you get to start sculpting, and you'll probably notice that you don't find anything because you haven't applied this. So if we scale this all the way up and click on the word apply and switch over to the surface placement right here, you would now notice that we can start sculpting. You can reduce the sculpting brush, and then you can start using this to either place things around, or you can draw to start sculpting on your model. And how this sculpting stuff actually makes sense is like this, that in most cases, you might want to start off by working symmetrically. So we're just going to set this as a symmetry. And if I hold down Control on the keyboard, I can increase the brush size, and I can use this brush size to add some stuff. So we can paint or simply sculpt, and sculpt some stuff right there. And I can reduce the brush size. Let's make some stuff go down here. Some would go down here as well. And we can drag this all the way down and all the way down like so. And like I mentioned, if you hold down Control, click and drag, you can increase the brush size. This applies to both the eraser, the warp tool, the smoothing tool, and also the inflate. The warp tool is more like your move or grab tool, depending on the 3D app you're coming from. And this is a pretty impressive one to see. So if we like to smooth things out, if we hold down Shift on the keyboard, you can smooth this out. And you'll notice that your smoothing does have 3 different modes, which includes the flatten mode, the peak and valleys, and the final one right here. So you can smooth this however you want, and sculpting with this is pretty different from what you get with traditional 3D tools. So if we tap E on the keyboard and switch over to the eraser, depending on the geometry that you have selected, that is the geometry that you can erase with. So if I have this, we can erase using this geometry. If I select this sphere, reduce the brush size, we can also use this to erase. And if you look closely, you would notice that this uses some sort of voxel-based sculpting mode to actually sculpt this. So I'm just going to go in and position this right about a point like so. So once we have that, let's go in and smooth this out, and we have this beauty. So one thing to mention is once you're placing objects, or once you're placing or sculpting, you would notice that depending on where you're looking at the given time, that is how the placement would work. So for example, if we're looking at the model from this point, you can see that it places it like so. And if we switch over and look at the model from this point, you'll notice it places it in this form. So you can see it has different modes of placement, and that could come in handy depending on the kind of character or, model that you're trying to make. So once we have this one going, we can also switch over and let's reduce the brush size as well. And in this case, I'm just going to make a very tiny nose. And we can also, make a very tiny mouth, like something like that. Beautiful. So once you have this one here, other things that you can do includes creating extra layers. So we mentioned that you can make layers earlier, but there is something about how you make layers that is pretty interesting. You don't see where these layers are stacked. So if I click on the plus sign here to make a layer, we cannot navigate through to find where these layers are stacked. But the cool thing is once you create a brand new layer, it simply means that you can now place new geometries and they don't intersect with what you had before. So if we use the surface placing mode, we can place new geometries right here. And if we would like to add some more geometries by simply using the Gizmo placement, we can. So if we also right click and go over right here and add a brand new layer, which is now considered layer 3, we can click on the plus sign and then select some other object. And with this object selected, we can move these wherever we want. And this is us just using the Gizmo placement mode, and we can add whatever we want right here. So in this case, I'm just going to add this, and this is probably just going to be some thrusters behind, or maybe some backpack. And once you're done, you can click on the word apply, and that simply applies it. You can now go in and start making some sculpting decisions. So say, for example, I would like to get rid of some part. We can go ahead and get rid of some part like so, because, we're looking at this from a very given angle. So we can cut that in half. And that looks nice. Let's see if we can even make it a bit more. So I'm just going to go ahead, increase the brush size, and let's stay proper. And I can cut this, and that looks cool. And we can also do the very same thing on the top, but I guess we should just let that be. So once you're done making your beautiful art piece, the next thing which you can do is to jump in and start texturing. And that is where this starts making some sense. So if we go ahead and switch over to the Gizmo, we can double click. So I'm just going to go in and make this selection. So double click just to make sure that you have only this one selected, then these ones get masked, and we can start painting. So once I have this, we can paint this pure white. That looks a little bit too white. So I'm just going to go ahead and change the tone just a bit. All right, so we have some white right there. Let's throw in some blacks, reduce this, position this where we want it to be. Click to get that there. And you would also notice that we have like the hardness brush. So I'm just going to crank that up, throw that one right in there. And we can switch back to the good old white and reduce this a little bit and just position this and place something right there. I think that's a bit too much. So maybe we can just place something right about the point like so. All right. So now we have that. Then the next thing, if you want, you can tap V on the keyboard, which switches to the selection mode, and you can double click to jump all the way out. And then you can simply double click to make just this object selected. And from here, you can go ahead and make some extra paintings depending on what you want to create. And you can use anything within your erase brush to do some stuff. So in this case, if we would like to use the erase brush, for example, to cut through this part, we can still stay within our interactive Gizmo placement mode and do it. So I can bring this all the way here and I can click on the word apply, and you can see it simply cuts this in half. And that makes more sense because at several times you would not only want to sculpt, you might just want to place things and use this sort of Boolean operations that exist here to create some beautiful looking models. So once you have your model ready, there is a whole lot of other things that you can do with this. So sculpting or, trying to place these things yourself can be very interesting, and it opens up a huge set of possibilities. So in this case, if you're thinking about using things like Radial, you can also go ahead and do it. So remember the last time we mentioned that if you right click, you can choose to do your symmetry, and there's also the radial one. So one of the things that we can do with that is, for example, let's say we create a brand new layer right now, and then we choose to use the interactive Gizmo placement mode to do some stuff. We can go ahead and look for rings. I think the rings one will be cool, or maybe we can just simply use the sphere. and we can go around and let's see what we can do with that. So we can push this all the way up, and let's just rotate this for fun. Rotate it a little bit and raise it all the way up. Okay, so I think we're rotating this a whole lot. So we can raise this all the way up, and let's just grab this all the way up and we can bring this down. So the thing with the radial symmetry is if you right click, you can increase the number of radials that you have, and this can be quite impressive and interesting as well. So we can also position this where we want them to be, scale this a little bit upwards, and you can start creating amazing stuff with it. So this is just a very beautiful tool. It's pretty simple. A little bit of orientation will be needed when you're working with this, because at certain times you might want to switch from the interactive gizmo placement to the surface placement, and that is also something that makes a little change when working with this. And I think working in this with VR is definitely going to be very, very interesting. One of the things in this case, which I was mentioning, that you might need to figure out is when you're painting. So if you switch over to the interactive stuff, the painting doesn't really work. So you might have to switch to the surface and do all of that stuff. So in this case, if we would like to paint certain things, we can just tap V on the keyboard, double click on the object, and you notice these are the ones get maxed, and we can switch over to the painting mode that we want. And of course, we can reduce the brush size like we mentioned earlier, and you can start painting. I mean, you can paint whatever you want. If we like to paint a couple of greens on our surface, of course we can. So we can just go in and just, you know, toss a little bit of green here and there just to make this not look totally all white. So we can toss a bit more, we can increase that, reduce the hardness, you know, play with the rate, and we can just do some stuff, you know, just to make it unnecessarily messy and not too clean for what we're creating. And here's a few more things to keep in mind if you choose to start testing out this tool now that it's still in beta. Now, for the most part, this build which I have doesn't work in terms of the Boolean. So the Boolean doesn't work in a sense. So like right now, I have this object as a different object in a different layer, and I have this other one as two different objects in, you know, another layer as well. If I go ahead and select the first one and select the second one and right click, we can group, we can merge, we can flip, we can duplicate. And right here, you would notice we have the Boolean. And with the Boolean, we can do one of three things, just one. Right now, you can do a union, but if you choose to do a subtraction mode, I don't know if it's me or maybe there's a way this works that doesn't just work right for me right now. This doesn't apply. So once you go ahead and apply this, click on done, you still notice that you have your individual objects the way they are. If you also choose to do this with the intersect, you notice the color changes, which proves that there's something that's supposed to happen, but then nothing happens. I think for the most part, what works right now is having both of them selected, right clicking and going over to, you know, the union and clicking on apply, and that one sticks. And the way it sticks is interesting because at this point you now have to separate these things for you to be able to have this as an individual piece. Not saying that, you know, that flickering doesn't make sense. It's just something that you have to move around, else you potentially not be able to just have this object as this. Something I would like to see in future release or future updates is if we can have these two objects merge together and they just stick together. Having this separate piece for like reusability doesn't really make sense at this point, since you just want to union these two. And one thing which I noticed is once you're done with the Boolean and you choose to move things around, for some reason the keyboard just freezes. So if I switch back to sculpting or to any of this mode, right now this freezes, and I believe it is because this is still within its early stage, it's beta. That is why we're having these issues. But so far so good, this looks pretty nice, and except for these bugs that you just get to experience after doing your Boolean, every other thing looks fine. And I think, you know, it's just a simple feedback for the developers to put some things into work. The mesh that you get is also another interesting thing altogether. So if you like to export this, if you click on file, you can go all the way to export, and you can export your file. You can also import meshes, and you can also export meshes. So if you would want to export this, you would need to select the vertex color, and this way it is going to export the paintings that you've done here, and you can choose from the file types that you have here which is FBX, OBJ, and USD. And in most cases, I think USD and FBX might be your best bet. So for the purpose of this video, we're going to export as FBX, and you might want to also set your output mesh to either be UV mapped with triangles or just the quads or just triangles. So UV map will be very good if you like to use this for rendering or maybe animation later. But for this video, we're just going to set this as triangles and then hit the export button to get it out. So with this open right here in Blender, you could see that every single thing that we sculpted came in. Now, if you would like to see what the wireframe looks like, because we exported this wireframe as triangulated stuff, if you go over to the overlays and you turn on the wireframe, you'll be able to see it, and it doesn't look bad. I mean, I actually expected something a bit worse, but this looks pretty nice to start off with. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn this off. And if we switch over to rendering, one thing which you would notice is all of the stuff that you have here don't come with a texture. Of course, you will remember very well that we exported with the vertex texture or the vertex color, but that doesn't seem to come in once you hit the render button initially. Now, it doesn't mean that this is not here in Blender. It just simply means that you have to go through the shading to make this visible. And how to do this is very, very simple, as all you need to do is drag out another 3D panel, and then you can switch from 3D to the shader editor. And from here is where you can start applying the vertex colors. And to apply this is very easy. To every model that you select, which comes in here, and you would also notice that all these models, they are sort of grouped based on the layers that was exported, or based on the layers that they existed prior to them being exported. So to each of them that you get to select, if you go over to the object properties and scroll all the way down to the color attributes, you would notice that we have the vertex color within the color attribute, and that in turn tells us how to apply the texture. So if I select a simple model and click on new, if we go all the way in, I can click on the base color and drag that and type in the word attribute, the color attribute, and before adding the vertex color attribute, automatically you notice that this applies the colors. So we can do that for every other one. And for the rings that we have on the top, or the spheres that we have on the top, what we're going to do is switch these over to the emission, because we like to have some shiny stuff up there. So I'm just going to crank that up, crank this one here, go over to where we have our render settings and turn on bloom, because we just want to have some bloom. So I'm just going to turn on that bloom, and we can have that right in here. So if there is any form of coloring, shading, relighting, whatever you like to do now, you can simply go ahead and start taking advantage of all of the beautiful things that you have here and start creating this. So for anyone who will be needing this file, I'm going to make this available on Gumroad, which you can get for free. So I'm going to put that link in the description. At the same time, link to getting the Substance 3D modeler is also going to be in the description. So do well to check it out. And if you'd like to tweak this, make some changes, or create an entire scene with this, then you might want to tag me on any of the social media handles that you see on your screen. Tell me what you guys think about this one in the comment section. And of course, if you like this video or you learned something from this, you can go ahead and give a like, and don't forget to share with a friend. And until I see you guys in the next one, peace.